Hello and welcome to A Stitch in Time. Today is Wednesday, November 15th, 2017, and this is episode 38. My name is Carol and I am known as Knits and Pearls on Ravelry. The show notes for this and every episode can be found on the blog, and they can also be found in the episode thread in the Ravelry group. Come by, introduce yourself, or take part in our Agatha Christie Along, which is a knit along, crochet along I'm hosting in conjunction with reading my way through my Agatha Christie collection. So the guidelines and a list of suggested patterns are in the first two posts in that thread. So feel free to jump in anytime. It's going to be running for a long time because I'm only about, I think, a third of the way through my book. So I've noticed that we have a number of new subscribers lately, so I want to say a special welcome to you. Thank you for checking the podcast out, and I know there are lots of knitting podcasts out there, so the fact that you have hit subscribe is very grateful for that, and I hope that you enjoy this and further episodes, so welcome. I thought it might be a good idea just to give a quick recap of who I am and what I do for those of you who are new. I live in the Fraser Valley, about 100 kilometers or 60 miles east of Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. And I live here with my husband. We have 3 grown children, a daughter who's married, and she has 3 kids. So 3 kids, 3 grandkids. We have lived here for 28 years. We're both BC born and raised. Over the years, I've held jobs at a fabric store, craft store, and most recently a yarn and needle workshop. So I'm interested in all those hobbies, and especially knitting at this stage of my life. And I enjoy knitting podcasts so much, I thought perhaps I would jump in and add my point of view to the mix. So I began this podcast in January of this year, and it's just been a really gratifying experience. So today's episode, it's a long one. So sit back, get yourself something hot or cold to drink, whichever your preference, and settle in for some knitting talk. I've got some, talk a little bit about what I've been reading. I have some acquisitions to share with you. And also this week I have a special segment that I'm going to include at the end. I was tagged by Jenny of the Lucky Jenny Knits podcast to take part in a Knit Life survey. And that's a series of 25 questions about my knitting life that I will answer. And then part of that is to tag 5 other podcasters and get them to do the same. And it's a way of promoting all the various knitting podcasts out there, old and new. So if you're interested, I'll tuck that in at the end. But up until that point, it'll just basically be like an ordinary episode. So let's get going, shall we? I have one finished project to share with you this week. And they are, right here. I have stuff everywhere today. These are what I call my Sedona socks. And that's because they are knit in, sorry, I think I just jiggled the ironing board here or my camera set up. They're knit in Black Cat custom yarn everyday sock in the Sedona colorway. And Black Cat Custom Yarn is a local indie dyer, and she's just opened a brick and mortar store in addition to having an online presence. So it's been really fun to have a shop with hand-dyed yarns to so near at hand. So this is my first skein that I bought, and this is the first sock that I knit up, and you can see it's got quite a spiral going on with the blue. This is just my very basic 64 stitch top down sock with a short row heel, and this is a second. I finished this Friday in line up for the ferry to go to Victoria. I'll talk more about that later. And it knit up a little bit differently than the first sock, but it's funny, the bottom looks very similar in the sense of the color saturation, but the top looks much paler. It's just interesting. I always find that interesting how hand-dyed yarns knit up. But yeah, there's my finished project for the week. So they are actually still damp. I just blocked them yesterday, I guess. So they're still quite damp. I'll have to lay them back out on their blocking mats so they can finish drying. So my rule of thumb is if you cast off one sock, you have to cast on another. And so that's what I did. I actually went down to Black Cat last week and picked up this yarn. It is from Ancient Arts. In addition to carrying her own hand-dyed yarn, she has a few other brands. This is the Superwash Merino and Nylon Fingering Weight, and it's in what she calls the Meow collection, or he or she or they. You can see a picture of a cat there. The colorway is Maine Coon Callie, and I don't know, Callie, K-A-L-I, I don't know if that's supposed to be the name of a cat. In any case, my sister Jacqueline has a Maine Coon cat named Sloopy, which apparently was named for Snoopy from Charlie Brown, but the previous owner was, English was not their native language, and so I guess they understood it as Sloopy, not Snoopy. But Sloopy he became, and Sloopy he remains. So Sloopy's getting on in years and is starting to fail, and he's a very special cat to my sister. So I thought I would make her some Sloopy socks. And as it turned out, I drew her name for Christmas this year. So that was even more perfect. I was going to do them and save them for her birthday. So I will be knitting them for Christmas. And these yarns, Ancient Arts, I think they have a dog yarn, a line of dog-related yarns also. And it says, portion of the proceeds from this yarn will be donated by Ancient Arts to charities benefiting stray and abandoned cats. So I would imagine the same is true for the dogs. So anyway, that's the yarn. So you say, yeah, but what does it look like? Well, here's what it looks like. This is it in the skein. It's lots of grays and beiges and browns and cream kind of. So I actually had lots of knitting time this weekend. So I've completed one entire sock. And I thought it was so interesting. I started out with the ribbing, and I really liked the way the yarn was distributing. And then I started to knit it, and it started these spirals, which I thought looked really cool too. But I was trying to decide, should I take it back and see if I can get it to look more like the ribbing? But I decided to continue, and then lo and behold, it did start looking more like the ribbing. And then after I did the short row heel, it went back to the swirly yarn. So I'm not a huge fan of flashing and pooling, etc., but I kind of thought these knit up in kind of a fun way, and I don't think it's something I can really control anyway, so I just had to ride with it. And I cast on the second sock, and it looks like it started to kind of do the same spirally thing, only closer together. So it'll be interesting to see how this sock knits up and if it resembles the first one in any way. So we'll find out. So yeah, I've been enjoying this yarn. Has a really nice feel to it. As soon as I cast it on, it just felt so good in my hands. And so I've really enjoyed working on these socks a lot. So I've got lots of time till Christmas. So now this sister lives in Toronto, so I do have to finish them in plenty of time to mail them, but I shouldn't have any trouble doing that. What's next? Oh, what's next is my socks for the Grocery Girls November Sock Bash. And the theme for this month is scrappy socks. So I decided to knit a pattern that I've been interested in knitting for a little while now, which is called Stepping into Fall by Sylvia Harding. And the original pattern, I don't have it right here, it's using a self-striping sock yarn, and each section of stripes has a different textured stitch pattern. So I thought that would be a pattern that would very easily be adapted into a scrappy sock. So I'm calling them my Stepping into Winter socks. And actually the first yarn that I really thought about using and really wanted to use was this. It's a Knit Picks Stroll Tweed in the North Pole Tweed or North Pole colorway, something like that. And I had knit, last year I knit the Alpine something shawl. I'll put it down at the bottom here. So at the same time I had bought this yarn, I'd also bought several other skeins of the Knit Picks Tweed yarn. So that was sort of my main goal, was to incorporate some of these. I've got the black one too, that. And I also had just a few other yarns I thought were kind of wintry feel to them. So I laid them all out and started. So I've actually got quite a ways. I'm knitting them 2 at a time concurrently, knitting them on separate needles, but basically I'll knit a stripe on one and then I'll knit a stripe on the other. So I'll just show you this one to begin with. They're toe-up socks, as you can see. So start there at that black tweed, and then this is, I think, Dove Heather Knit Pick Stroll. Had a little bit of pine green. This is a non-Knit Pick Stroll yarn, but I think it's Preface by Fildar, I think. Just a little bit of ecru anyway. Then this is another one of the tweeds. And then that North Pole one. A little bit of brown I had left. This dark blue. This is, I think, Mermaid. No, it's Tide Pool Heather Stroll. Most of these are Stroll sock yarns. This one I think is Sapphire, Mermaid, and then back to the black again. The Wellies it's called. So I have, as you can see, I did the heel in the Wellies colorway, and now I've started this striped sequence again. And it'll take me up to the top, and I will finish with the wellies again, do the cuff with that color. So I think they're coming along really well. I've had a lot of fun knitting on them. I think because it's, you know, you just want to do the next stripe and the next stripe and the next stripe and just see, you know, how it all turns out. So I do have that far done. And then the second sock, I'm just one stripe behind, as you might imagine. So there we go. So there. So that's well on its way to being done by the end of the month, which is the deadline for that. So they've been really fun to work on. So I just dropped some yarn. I have stuff everywhere, like I said. So another scrappy project I have been working on is I've been continuing this work on my mitered square sock yarn blanket, and I have begun filling in all the triangles along the top border. So beginning with this little one here, and you can see I've worked across the whole top. I really like the way this kind of finishes it off. It's a large blanket, big enough to cover the top of a queen-size bed. This marker I use to mark the center stitches, that you do a double decrease in the middle of every one, so that just helps me find that spot to begin with. So yeah, so I've done the top edge, and all I have to do is do the same process along the bottom edge, and then I'll be done all the main knitting, and then I have to figure out how I'm going to finish it off, either with an I-cord border or more likely a crocheted border. So that'll determine once I'm all done, and I'll experiment a little, see what look I like best and how just how it comes along. So I've been very good with this project, except for all these single yarns along the edges. I've been weaving my ends in as I go, so that is a huge job, and I'm glad that it's done. I would do a few squares and then I'd weave a few ends in, and so it's never been an overwhelming part of this project. So I'm glad that I decided to do that. Otherwise, if I got to the end and had all those gazillion ends to weave in, I think I would lose mojo pretty fast. So yeah, I've been enjoying that a lot. And I did last week actually pick out all the yarns to use for the bottom triangles, so there's nothing stopping me. I can just, as soon as I'm ready to do another one, I can just grab that ball of yarn and go. So the end is definitely in sight. But now that the end's in sight, I'm starting to think about the next one, and I have a few ideas. So I'm looking forward to the next few weeks and having a chance to kind of experiment a little and see if what I'm thinking about is actually going to work out. Just drinking some orange pekoe tea today, nothing special. It was very overcast and rainy this morning, very dark. And then this afternoon, it's about 3 o'clock now. This afternoon, the sun came out, and actually I'll put a picture here or a little bit of footage. There was, just before I podcasted, I looked out the window, and there was a rainbow, and could see the clouds had cleared. There was fresh snow on the mountains. So I'll just insert that little video here. As you can see, I live, we back onto farmland. We are not a farm, but we live in the I guess suburbs, I don't know what you call it, just a housing, residential area, there you go, that backs onto farmland. So as you can see, we have a beautiful view out our back. We're very fortunate. Okay, so moving on, I have been working away on my Chimera cardigan by Carol Feller, and that is being knit in Blue Moon Fiber Arts Cake Worsted in the Bittersweet colorway. This knit along has been done with a series of clues. We had a picture of the finished cardigan to begin with, so it's not a mystery in that sense. Idea of what it looks like. And so we have received the clues on a regular basis, and we just recently received the fourth and last clue on Saturday. And so, I can hear my furnace starting up. I hope it's not too noisy in the background. I noticed listening to last week's podcast while I was editing that I could hear it kick in. But there's nothing I can do about it, and it's not warm enough to not have a furnace going this time of year. So anyway, I have finished the body of the cardigan. So the sleeves were done, and I think last week I had picked up along the bottom of the yoke area and started to knit down. And I can see the sun is coming in and giving that, really brightening that up. So it's kind of hard to hold up. I'll show you the back. It's finished with a couple of inches of 2x2 ribbing, and this panel goes all the way down the back and also along the two fronts, down the two fronts. It's kind of a textured stitch pattern. And then I'll show them to you after. While we were in Victoria this weekend, I actually found some buttons for the sweater that I prefer over the ones that I previously purchased them. So I'll show you that when I start talking about my acquisitions. But yeah, so the main bulk of the sweater is done. Now I just have to pick up along the neck edge and along the two fronts and knit the button and buttonhole bands, and then it will be done. So I'm looking forward to having this finished, blocking it, and being able to wear it. And last but not least, I actually have a project that's pretty well done. I finished the bind off this morning. I just need to, so I'm going to shake the camera a little bit, I think. I just need to block it now. And that is the afternoon tea shawl. And it is being knit with this yarn from Kinfolk Yarn and Fiber, Steadfast Sock. in the Tea at the Empress Hotel colorway. And the Empress Hotel is in Victoria, British Columbia. And I've knit this shawl for my sister's birthday. She and her husband visit Victoria every year or two, or maybe 3, and they like to go have tea at the Empress Hotel. So I thought the colorway was perfect for her, and then I found the shawl that actually references afternoon tea, so I thought it was a great match. So as you can see, it's a semicircular shawl, half pie shawl. Has this mesh pattern for the bulk of it, and then this lovely zigzaggy lace on the bottom with a picot lace bind off. So I think that's going to be just gorgeous when it's all blocked. I can't wait to see the transformation on this one. So I should get to that probably this afternoon or tomorrow morning. So yeah, I think it's just the right size for for a scarf. And it'll be easy to wear, I think. My sister is not too, she doesn't like anything too fussy. So I think this will be just right for her. She'll be able to easily just wrap up in it and not have to fiddle too much to make it look right. So yeah, very pleased with that. So as you can see, I've got quite a bit of knitting done this past, almost 2 weeks, I guess, since we spoke last. So I've had quite a bit of time for that. I have a couple of things that are up and coming. The first one I want to talk about is the latest pattern by Helen Stewart, or Curious Handmade. She has started to release her Knit Vent 2017 patterns. A Knit Vent is something she's done for the last, I think, 4 years now. And she releases a set of patterns with a kind of a winter theme. A lot of them are suitable as gifts or just projects for yourself. And so I signed up for it again this year. And the first pattern is called Land of Sweets, and it is a cowl pattern. And it is a long cowl. You can see here. Not sure. I want to make sure cover up. Oh, that's just pattern information, so that's okay. And then I really liked, this was one that a test knitter did. I like all those colors there. And then it can be worn like this too. So as soon as I saw that the pattern called for 24 mini skeins, I thought it would be a perfect advent calendar type of project. So what I'm going to do is use lots of, like, my sock yarn scraps. I have plenty left over from my sock yarn blanket, and I'm going to pick out a bunch of the sock yarn scraps and knit a section every day from December 1st till the 24th, and it'll be sort of my advent project. So I was lying in bed last night thinking about it, because that's what you do when you can't sleep, right? You think about knitting. And I think it's because I was inspired by this version here. There seemed lots of kind of soft shades in there. And I got to thinking, it's called Land of Sweets, and I got to thinking about a couple of different kinds of candies that you kind of see at Christmas. One is, my mom used to call them, I think, French creams, and they were really pale pastel, kind of a soft, not a chewy candy, but kind of a soft candy. I'll see if I can find a picture and put it in here. And also ones we called party mints, which are kind of pastel colored candies, and some of them taste like, have a faint, like sort of a peppermint flavor, very mild. So I was thinking of all those really soft colors, and I've just pulled out a few skeins from my scraps, and these are the kinds of colors I'm envisioning this. I'm not sure if the light's picking it up. This is like a pale yellow with some blue and some peach in it. This is something very similar but different. This has got pink with some yellow in it. There's a soft gold, soft pink again, kind of a soft blue. So these are the kinds of colors I'm envisioning, and I'm not sure if this will be the final product or not, but what I'm envisioning is kind of doing a section of yellows, and then, kind of blending into maybe, green, and then blending into pink or blue, and kind of almost doing a gradient style, but just using the little bits of all the various yarns. So that's kind of what's percolating in my brain now. We'll see how the final version turns out. But I thought it'd be a really fun way to knit that and not have it as a kind of just a project just for me, and one that doesn't need a lot of time each day to complete. But at the end of it, I'll have a beautiful finished project. So that's where I'm going to be looking at doing, like I say, beginning December 1st. And then before that, I've got a couple of Christmas things I want to knit besides those socks for my sister. This weekend I picked up some yarn for a scarf and a hat for my younger granddaughter. It's bright pink with some metallic in it. I'll show it to you when I get to that project. And then my grandson, he's turning 7 just in about a week. And I guess he's really been enjoying wearing hand knit socks lately. So I'm going to knit him a pair of socks for Christmas also. So that's not too much to do between now and then. And I may, other projects may find their way into my list. But for now, those are sort of my Christmas knitting projects that I have in mind. I do knit for people all year round. So I have several pairs of socks for various birthdays already done and set aside, so that takes a lot of the pressure off come Christmas time. There's nothing worse than building up to the holiday and you're all frantic and stressed over getting gifts done in time. I just don't enjoy that, so I try and avoid it as much as possible. So I'll talk about acquisitions now. We were in Victoria this weekend. I think I mentioned that already. And they have a beautiful yarn shop called Beehive Wool Shop. And, pardon me, I like to shop there. Oh, I know. Before I do that, I was at Black Cat Fibers last week here in town. So I'm just going to reach over and grab my things here. When I bought the yarn for my sister's socks, I also picked up another skein of Black Cat yarn. And this is in the Nyan colorway in Everyday Sock. I think it's for Nyan Cat, which is, I think, an animated Japanese show. I've never watched it. I just thought the colors in here were really pretty and would be fun just knit into a pair of plain socks. So that's where my thinking was in picking that out. There are so many. I could have come home with a dozen skeins of yarn, but I held myself to one. Then in Victoria, again, could have bought many things. I actually have a 15% off like customer loyalty card credit thing. And I didn't use it last time in the spring, and I couldn't bring myself to use it this time either because I only ended up buying 2 skeins of yarn, and I want to save it for a bigger purchase, like maybe a sweater's quantity. So they said it doesn't expire, so I'm going to hold on to that and maybe use it next time I go. One of the things I picked up is a skein of Sweet Georgia Tough Love Sock in the Gold Mine colorway. Now those who've been watching have seen that I've been a couple times have used this or attempted to use this other skein of Sweet Georgia Tough Love Sock in Smitten. I've tried to use that in a sweater and in a shawl most recently. And Sweet Georgia recently did a mystery knit along for a shawl. and it uses 3 colors of yarn, 2 solids and 1 variegated. So what I did, I already had this fuchsia, it's called Orchid actually, and the Smitten. And so what I did is I found the gold that's in this yarn. I don't know if that shows up very well or not, but this exact color is also in this yarn. And I thought the 3 together would knit up very nicely. Although I'm also from, I have a little ball here of, let me just double check the name of this one. I always forget. Ultraviolet. See, it might be a bit dark. I thought that might also look good with the gold, but I actually think the fuchsia is probably a better choice. Or the orchid, sorry, I keep calling it fuchsia, but the actual colorway is orchid. So anyway, I'm thinking about knitting that shawl. It is called Cedarburg. And I think those, finally I think I will have a winner for this, this yarn. So that's up and coming at some point. One of the suggestions for that shawl was actually this skein that I already own, which is Anthem with the orchid. And then there is a very pale purple that's in here. And the skein is called London Fog. But they didn't have any in stock, so I'm going to have to order some. But I think what I'm going to do is pick up a skein of London Fog and then use most of the colors from this Party of 5 set that I used sort of unsuccessfully in my surprise party shawl. And let's see, that'll take the light off a bit better. I'm going to skip the yellow. But these other colors, I'll bring them out so you can see them better. So there's raspberry and mulberry. This one is grape jelly, and then the ultraviolet. And I thought the 4 together with this yarn, with the London Fog, could be used quite effectively in a shawl. So that's another future plan. So everything, you know, I'm always thinking, as I'm knitting one project, I'm always 2 or 3 or 4 ahead, just how my brain works. So definitely have some fun knitting ahead of me with those purchases. And then I also, when I went in, well, here it is, they had a store sample knit up. This is not the best picture. I got the pattern free with the yarn purchase. It's a little scarf, kind of in the construction like a hitchhiker type of thing, and it was knit up in this hedgehog fiber sock in Poison is the colorway. And actually in the shop with the lighting, I actually thought this was black, but it's not. It's more of a really dark purple, and then this bright fuchsia color. It just looked really cute, and I just really thought I would enjoy that. So again, another upcoming knit, you know, at some point. And then, as I mentioned, I did find some other buttons for my Chimera cardigan. So I'll just show those to you really quick. I had luck. It's called the Button and Needlework Boutique, and I had luck there last spring getting buttons actually for another Carol Feller cardigan knit along that I was doing, the sugarcane cardigan. So I was very happy to have just as good a luck this time. So here's the swatch. And then this is the button here. Bring that up close. So I could have asked for a better match. So yeah, I was really pleased to have done that. So all in all, a really good little shopping trip. All right, let's move away from knitting and talk about what I'm reading. Reach over here. I finished Dan Brown Origin. Very typical Dan Brown book. There's a lovely lady and a deadline and a mystery and some violence. And this one takes place in Spain, in Bilbao, at the Guggenheim Museum, and then the action moves to Barcelona. And those are both two places I've been, and so that always makes a book more interesting when you can kind of picture some of the setting. Anyway, yep, very just a good page turner. I have to say the ending was rather hard to believe, but it's fiction, so it's okay to suspend belief once in a while and just enjoy fiction for fiction's sake. It doesn't always have to be a deep read. And then this past week, again, lots of time, I'll get into that on the weekend to read and knit. So I completely read Glass Houses by Louise Penny, and that's the most recent in her Inspector Gamache series, and it was excellent. They're mysteries and very thoughtful, great character development over the series. I always thoroughly enjoy her books, so I would highly recommend that series if you like mysteries. And they're set in Quebec in Canada, and she's a Canadian author. And then I am back to my Agatha Christie. So the most recent one that I began is Poirot Loses a Client. Oh, and it just dawned on me that Murder on the Orient Express is now out in theaters. So I'm going to have to talk to my husband, and we're going to have to make a date maybe this weekend to go see it. So it slipped my mind because we were traveling. So yes, can't wait to see that. So anyway, this is good so far. It's a older spinster, passes away not too unexpectedly, but what people don't know is that before she died, she sent a letter to Hercule Poirot with some suspicions, and so now he is checking things out. And do you think maybe one of her nieces or nephews has arranged her early death so that they could inherit her fortune? Well, we're about to find out, so reading along in that. Yeah, so not lots to talk about as far as my week has gone. One thing we did was really fun. I have said earlier, we normally would play volleyball in the fall and winter with some friends, very casually, once a week at a school gym. But unfortunately, the school district changed their rental of their facilities policy this year. And so it's just too expensive and requires costs of insurance and paying for a supervisor or somebody who works there to be their faculty member, to be on staff, etc., etc. It's just beyond our means now as a group. So we haven't been playing volleyball, but we did go bowling last Tuesday. There were 15 of us, and most of us hadn't bowled for years, but it was a lot of fun and not too expensive. So we went bowling, had a couple of games, and then went and had a drink after, and thoroughly enjoyed seeing everybody again. And I think that's something we're going to try and do maybe a couple of times a month from over the winter. So that it's not volleyball, and it's not as good a physical activity as far as getting exercise, but I'm sure we'll have just as many laughs, and it will be fun to all get together. So hopefully we're going to do that. And then, as I said, we went to Victoria this weekend. That is on Vancouver Island, for those who don't know. And you have to take a ferry to get there. You could fly, but I mean, most people will take a ferry. And it was a long weekend. Saturday was Remembrance Day here in Canada, which is when we remember our soldiers who have served and lost their lives. And so the statutory holiday for that was on Monday, so it made a long weekend for us. So the ferries are always busy on the long weekend. We left Friday to get to the ferry. We arrived there at 5:15, and we were told we were going to be on the 9 o'clock sailing, which there's a 5, 6, 7, and 9. So, and you can reserve, but you can only reserve so many days ahead of time, or you can't reserve like an hour ahead or something. You have to do it in advance. And my husband didn't know when he was going to be able to get away from work, so we really couldn't reserve. Plus, you have to get there, and you sort of you can't get there too early, or you're not allowed in line. And if you get there too late, you lose your reservation. And so there's only about a half an hour window in which that you can arrive. And just because we live quite a ways away, we never know how traffic's going to be, and most of the time we just don't bother reserving. Once we did, and we drove around for half an hour just to kill some time so we could actually, get there at the right time. In any case, we were prepared to wait that time, plus the ferries were running late, about a half an hour behind. But surprisingly, we actually were one of the maybe half dozen cars onto the 7 o'clock sailing, which actually left about 7:30. So that was nice. Cut a couple of hours off our wait time there. So that was great. But I had finished my Sedona sock on the way to the ferry, and then when I got on the ferry, I cast on the Sloopy sock, and I actually ended up finishing that Sunday while waiting in the ferry lineup. Monday, sorry. Monday was very stormy, stormy and windy. We got to the ferry terminal at 9:45, plenty of time for the 11 o'clock sailing, but unfortunately the sailings had all been canceled because of high winds, and they weren't able to dock on the Vancouver side. So we had plenty of time, again, to sit in line. I read my book and I knit. And just before we got on the ferry, I Kitchenered the toe on my first Sloopy sock. So we got there 9:45. We boarded the ferry at 3:15. So it was another long day. I cast on the second sock while we were on the ferry and managed to, get a fair chunk done. But it was a long day. We didn't get home till just about 7 o'clock. And we had planned to get home in plenty of time in the afternoon to get home and go get groceries for the week and, have a nice quiet evening at home. Well, we went to get groceries, and then as it turned out, because it was the stat holiday, the grocery stores were already all closed. So I had to do that, go grocery shopping yesterday. So it was just kind of a long day, felt like a wasted day, other than the fact that I did get quite a bit of knitting done. So bright side to everything, right? So Saturday was Remembrance Day, and my mother-in-law served here in Canada during World War II, and my father-in-law had been a veteran of the Navy and also served during the war and after. So Remembrance Day means something, obviously, to my husband's family. So, pardon me, my mother-in-law lives in an assisted living place, and so they had a ceremony Saturday afternoon so that the Sea Cadets came in and did the ceremony there, so that the older people didn't have to go out in the to the cenotaph or somewhere to attend a Remembrance Day ceremony. So my husband and I went to that with my mother-in-law, and She actually was asked to lay the wreath for the seniors' home, so she felt quite proud of that. And then they had like a little tea afterwards. So it was a nice way to remember. And then Sunday we took a drive up the island to where my father-in-law is buried and put a poppy on his grave. I don't have one because we laid them, but in Canada we have the Legion raises money by for donations selling poppies that you wear on your your lapel or over your heart to commemorate our soldiers. So we went and laid a poppy on my father-in-law's grave and took my mother-in-law for a bit more of a drive before heading back. It was not a very nice day for it. It was pouring rain, but good for her to get out and stuff, I think. And nice to have a little more time with her before heading home the next day. So yeah, that was our week. Not that much to it. So not much coming ahead. It's a short week. It's already Wednesday, and having the long weekend means a short week. Curling tomorrow night, and that's about all that's planned. So that's good. I should be able to get, well, I have jobs around the house that I really need to get to and stuff, but I should have plenty of time for knitting too. So that's as far as the regular podcast goes. So I'm going to pause here and collect my notes, and then do the Knit Life survey. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more of me as my and my life as a knitter, then stick around. And if not, take care. Thank you for watching, and I should be back next week with another episode. So happy knitting, and if you want, stick around. I'll be right back. So welcome back. So this is the Knit Life survey portion of this podcast. As I mentioned, Jenny, or Lucky Jenny Knits, that's her Ravelry username. She has the Lucky Jenny Knits podcast on YouTube. She nominated me for this survey, so I will answer the 25 questions that are part of it, and then I will let you know who I'm going to nominate in turn. So the first question, actually the first and second question, I'm going to kind of answer together. So the first question is, what sparked your interest in knitting? And the second is, how and when did you learn to knit? So I learned to knit, I think I was probably about 7 years old. As part of Brownies, we had to knit a square for this blanket or this mat we used to put around the toadstool in our Brownie meetings. So that was my introduction into knitting, and I just think my mom was a knitter, and I think once I knew how to do it, it was something I enjoyed. And I do remember fairly early on knitting Barbie clothes. She had some Barbie patterns, and now I look back, I remember knitting this Barbie skating dress out of mohair yarn on double pointed needles. Like, I'm not sure that's one of the first projects that most kids knit, and but it did, and it worked. So when I look back and think how fiddly that was, I'm sure I started probably with other than the square, probably a scarf or something. I don't remember that for sure, but I do remember knitting Barbie clothes fairly early on. So that's my introduction. And then I got away from knitting for a while and went back to it as a young adult. I remember doing a fair bit of knitting when my daughter was a baby. Did some clothes for her and some sweaters for myself, and then really came back to it kind of in would have been the early 2000s, I guess. And then I got a job at a yarn shop in 2003, and then I really started to knit a lot. I just see the lights change. The sun, I think, is probably starting to go down pretty soon. So hopefully the light will be okay for this section. So, second question, what is your favorite cast-on method? Long tail cast-on. For years, all I knew was the knitting on, the knit on cast-on. That's how I learned. But ever since I learned long tail, that's my preferred method for most things. And for a toe-up sock or something that needs to be joined provisionally, I love Judy's Magic Cast-On for that. What is your favorite type of knitting design element? Brioche, lace, cables, colorwork? Probably lace and probably cables too, but really like lace. What is your favorite project you have ever knit? Well, back in 2008, Knitters magazine put out the Great American Afghan, and my sister and I don't know if it was put out in 2008. That's when I knit it. My sister and I were in a yarn shop down in Washington State, and they had a sample done up, and my sister just loved it. So I decided to knit it for her, and I rigged the Christmas draw. We always draw names for Christmas. And I rigged it so that my husband and I got her and her husband for Christmas because of the cost of it. And it was a huge surprise. So I'll put a picture of it in here. It's was very enjoyable to work because each square was different and used different colors, and then just seeing the look on her face when she got it was all worth it. So I got the sun in my eyes, so I've got spots in front of my eyes. Let's see if I can read this better. How many projects are in your Ravelry queue? Well, I actually checked before I recorded, and there are no projects in my queue, which is not to say there aren't lots of projects in this queue. I used to use my Ravelry queue just for putting projects I knew I was absolutely going to knit and match it up with the yarn. But if I see patterns I like, I put them in my favorites. So a lot of people use their queue to mark patterns they like or designs they want to knit. I use my favorites for that. And I didn't even check to see how many patterns are in my favorites, but it's lots and lots and lots and lots and lots. What is your favorite weight of yarn to work with? Fingering. These, you can't see from where you are. I have a lot of fingering weight yarn. 4 of these, they're actually at the bottom below here, but 4 of those plus 3 baskets up here are all full of fingering weight yarn. What was your first knitting project? I've already mentioned the square for brownies, and then I know I moved on to Barbie clothes soon after. What is the longest time you have had a half-finished project in hibernation? What is it, and when did you cast on? Do you still want to finish it? Well, I had to look for this back in 2007. I cast on this project by Nora Gone from this Vogue magazine. So this is Vogue Fall 2007. And I was going to make this sweater here, this blue one. And I bought a whole bunch of this, what's it called? Knit Picks Swish Superwash. You can see it's in a very similar color. And I finished the back. And it has a insert that goes in the back at the bottom in between where this split is. Now, maybe I knit 2 fronts. There's one. Oh, I just found a Knit Picks interchangeable cable I didn't know I had. There's the other the other front. And that's it. Oh no, I've got another piece in here. I don't even know what it is. Maybe a collar? I don't know. Am I going to finish it? No. For one thing, I ended up knitting something else with some of this leftover, or some of the skeins that I still had. So I don't have enough yarn to finish it. And it's all in pieces. I don't really feel like sewing it all together. I think my knitting has evolved since then, improved since then. It would be like picking up somebody else's project, I think. So really what I should do is frog it, wash out the yarn, reclaim this bag, reclaim the cable for my interchangeable needles, and call it done. There, you heard it here first. What is the largest project you've ever knit? Well, one of the largest is my mitered sock yarn blanket for sure. And I guess also then I would say the Great American Afghan, and also for my parents I knit the Great American Aran Afghan, and I'll put a picture of it in here. So those are probably the three largest projects. They're all around the same size that I've knit. Sorry, you're tickling my nose now. What is the worst and just overall bad, didn't work out thing you ever knit? Explain what went wrong. Well, I thought about this, and I honestly don't know that I can tell you an actual project, but what it got me to thinking about was, well, like this Sweet Georgia yarn that's now onto its third project, I've had a few yarns over the years that I've struggled to find just the right project for. And one of them is the sweater I'm wearing. The yarn is Joe Sharp Silk Road DK Tweed, and it is in the cocoa colorway. I think I wrote down the number here, 416. So I had seen this yarn. My daughter lived for a time in near Olympia, Washington. And we'd go down to see her, and we'd go visit the yarn shop, and they had this yarn there, and it always caught my eye. But it was expensive to buy a sweater's worth of it, and at that time it was prohibitively expensive, and so I never felt like I could justify it. And it was this soft oatmeal-y color, and it had a little bit of pink in it, a little bit of pink tweedy bits. And so I never did buy it there, but one time when I was on the website, I ended up buying a sweater's worth of it. And when it arrived, it didn't have quite as much of the little pinky color that I really liked in it, but I still liked the yarn. So first I tried the Filingdale's cardigan, and it wasn't that there was anything wrong with it. I just, as I was knitting it, I didn't know that I would like the style. And then I took all that out, and then I knit Hallett's Ledge. But then again, for some reason, it just wasn't the right thing. And so I called this third time's a charm, the third time's a charm, I think, or 3 times as a charm, something like that I called in my Ravelry projects. This is the Quercus cardigan by Julie Turgeman. And I knit it, began in November 2011, finished March 2012. And it's actually, it's a knitty pattern, so it was free. It's a short sleeve cardigan with this cable that runs down the front, and it's got just this open rolled front that you can I closed it sometimes with a shawl pin. And then I'll just turn around, you can see the back. It's got the cable at the back there. Kind of an A-line cardigan. So that's one of those, has a happy ending, but rather than a project, I felt like it was sometimes just struggling to find the right project for the right yarn. What is your favorite kind of project to make? Socks, sweaters, shawls, etc.? I really like all three. Probably in more recent years, socks has been at the top of the list. I'd say that's followed by shawls and then sweaters, but I really do enjoy all of them. And I have absolutely adored my mitered square scrap sock yarn blanket. That has been one of my favorite projects ever. What is your favorite type of fiber to work with? Wool. No question. Are you a self-proclaimed yarn snob? Yes and no. I think there are synthetic yarns that have their place, but for most of what I knit, I use wool or nicer yarns. But you know, if I just bought a bunch of acrylic yarn to knit my granddaughter scarf and hat. There's no point getting good wool for her. She's going to outgrow it, and she, you know, it's a kid's thing. Mind you, I have knit her a nice wool sweater. So depending on the item, I'll use good stuff, but mostly for kids or gifts for people who aren't knitters, I'll give them something synthetic because it's way easier for them, and then I'm not worrying about them ruining it. So there's a place for every type of yarn, as far as I'm concerned. What is your dream knitting retreat or fiber festival to attend? I would say Rhinebeck. I hear so much about it. It looks like it's fabulous. We have Knit City here in Vancouver, which is closer to home, but it's something that every year we seem to be away. I'm hoping that 2018 might be the year. It seems such a shame not to attend when it's so close by. What is the oldest yarn in your stash? You know, I don't know. I still have yarn that I bought when I worked at the yarn shop. I also, as I was digging out that sweater project, I came across this bag from Michael's that has like this Peyton's Brilliant yarn that I was going to knit some kind of tank top or something out of, and this mohair-ish type lacy yarn that I was going to do a matching sweater. That will probably never happen, but that gives you an idea of some of what I have. Most of my stash is pretty good. That was one of those exceptions. Are you a gifty knitter or a selfish knitter? I'm both. I knit all year round for other people, but I also knit a lot for myself. I think I have a good balance. What do you like to watch or listen to while you knit? Mostly I watch video podcasts while I knit. Sometimes I put on YouTube and watch like cable news, especially these days. There's lots of interesting things going on. I like to watch Netflix. I really like nature shows. And I know I watched the whole series of Gilmore Girls a couple of years ago. I hadn't seen it when it was originally out, and then I began watching it all the way through to the latest installment. Sometimes, too, I'll listen to audiobooks when I knit, too. So that's kind of what I do. Let's see. Do you prefer wood or metal needles? Definitely metal. The odd time I'll use wood, but metal is my go-to. Is there a pattern or project that you have knit more than one time, just for fun? Well, I wouldn't say it's just for fun, but I have knit, I just realized I'm wearing them, so I can show you. Felted Clogs by Bev Gluskas. I have knit an umpteen pairs of these, both for gifts and for myself. So I don't knit those for fun. I knit them because everybody loves them, and they do wear out after a while. Let me see. So it's hard to read. I'm going from a bright wall with the sun on it, and then I look at the page and it's hard to see. Got little spots in front of my eyes. Do you have any other hobbies? Well, I like to cross stitch. Haven't done it much lately. I used to do a lot of genealogy, even did a lot of courses in it, got a certificate, thinking I would do that for a living one day. I haven't done that much, but I do enjoy it. I like to read. I like to sew. I curl once a week in the winter and golf a few times in the summer. So those would be my hobbies. What is your favorite snack? I love chips and dip. I don't try not to eat it very often, but that's my downfall. What is your favorite color? Red. Nice true red. Do you have pets? If so, tell us about them. We don't have pets anymore. We had a cat. She was, we saw her being born. She was born to a stray that my son's friend's mom brought home. And the cat was pregnant, and she asked us if we wanted one of the kittens. And so we said yes. And we had Misty for 18 and a half years before she died about 3 years ago. We had to put her down. Her kidneys had failed. So had her for a long time. And last but not least, coffee or tea? Well, tea. Resounding tea. Although occasionally I like a flavored coffee, like I had a peppermint mocha on the weekend. And sometimes I like a dessert coffee, like a B52 coffee or a Bailey's coffee. But it has to be decaf because I drink so little coffee that when I have it, I absolutely buzz afterwards. So yeah, that's the 25 questions. So you know a little bit more about me, whether you wanted to or not. Though I guess if you're watching this part, it's because you were curious. So I am going to send this along to Sarah of Love Sock Wool Podcast. She's been podcasting since 2015. She lives in St. Paul, Minnesota, and she, as her name suggests, knits lots and lots of socks. She has a very laid-back, casual kind of podcast, and I always enjoy looking at all the different socks she knits and hearing about her family and such. She's got just a very friendly, warm presence, and I always enjoy watching that. I'm also going to nominate Emily, or Chain of Fools, from Fiber Town. I've watched that podcast since the beginning. She started I have it written down, 2013, is that right? And she also has an Etsy shop where she sells some bags that she makes. Actually, Sarah of Love Sock Wool also does project bags and sells them. Emily has lots of experience with spinning and weaving, knitting. She uses lots of really natural types of fibers, like, that's not the right word, wool is natural anyway, but more rustic yarns, more close to the sheep, if you know what I mean, less processed. She does processes a lot of her own fleeces and uses those to always enjoy her podcast. She lives near Washington, D.C. And then I've watched Lisa from Fiber Nymph from the 90% Knitting podcast. She's Fiber Nymph on Ravelry, and she has a business, Fiber Nymph Dye Works. I've watched her since the beginning in 2011. And she lives in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and yeah, just I guess she's around my age. She's I think I relate to that, and yeah, just again, like hearing about her knitting projects and her family and stuff. It's nice when you get to know a little bit about your podcaster beyond just what they knit. I think that's part of the draw of podcasts. At least it is for me. You get to know, feel like you know them. And then another of my favorites is Little Yellow Uke podcast. That's hosted by Zena, or Little Yellow Uke on Ravelry. She used to have an audio podcast, but she's been doing a video podcast since 2014. She lives in England, and she kind of went off podcasting for a little while, but she's back. She's not as often as she used to, but every time I see one of her podcasts pop up on my feed, I am always excited to watch it right away. Again, just a very conversational, easy to listen to podcast. A lot of her projects really appeal to me aesthetically, and she's also a yarn dyer. She has an Etsy shop. And then my last one is a podcast I've just discovered. It is called A Wooden Nest Podcast. It's done by Lindsay, or A Wooden Nest, on Ravelry, and she lives in Oregon. And she just has 2 episodes, and I've just watched the first one, but it's such a calm, she has beautiful kind of muted lighting, and it's a really calm way of talking, and she's been dyeing some yarns using natural ingredients, things like onion skins and things from her garden. And she had a beautiful cardigan for her young daughter that she had dyed the yarn herself. And I think it was with, I was going to say avocados. She did use avocados for something, but I can't remember what she dyed her daughter's cardigan with. But anyway, a beautiful knitter, and just really interesting to hear about the dyeing process. So those are my 5 nominees. It's a little weird. I tend to be on the shy side, so it's actually taking a lot of nerve, to be honest with you, to send these notes out to them. And I hope they participate. I think it's a fun way to spread the love and maybe introduce our viewers to podcasts that they may not have seen before. And I just think it was kind of fun answering all the questions too, things you don't always think about. So I hope you enjoyed that part of it. Thanks, Jenny, for nominating me for that, or tagging me in it. So that brings us to the end of the Knit Life segment, and that brings us to the very, very end of this week's episode. I know it's a long one, so thanks if you stuck by through the whole thing. I'll be back next week with more knitting for sure, and maybe even some sewing. I'd like to get back into that, do a little bit of sewing. We'll see how the week progresses. So until then, take care of yourselves. I hope you're well wherever you are, and happy knitting. Thanks for watching. Bye.